Glad to be here with you this evening, and I think this is a very timely issue that I think that all parents, uh, family members, individuals are touched by to some degree or another. And this talk was originally developed, I think, about 3 years ago, and I put a few things here and there into it. But the technology is changing so quickly, as I know all of you know, that I think this is even more applicable today as far as the knowledge base that we ought to know, and the potential risk of the issue of sextortion. So I'm very happy to be able to speak with you today, and very grateful for the two people that you just heard, Daryl and Leah. They are the driving force and the brains that really make these webinars work. So much appreciation to them. If I could just give a little maybe background on my professional history so that you know where I'm coming from as we talk here tonight. First of all, I get the privilege of currently being the SASH president. I've been in that position for about 1.5 years and worked with the wonderful board and committee members, and I'm very excited for the work that's going on within the organization and working with all the members of SASH. That's a wonderful opportunity. Professionally, my career for the last 25 years has been working with individuals primarily who are dealing with problematic sexual behavior in terms of sexual offending. So those who have crossed the legal barrier, those who may be experiencing sexual compulsivity, whether it be paying for sex workers or crossing professional boundaries, compulsive pornography, things of that nature. And I first got introduced to the issue of sextortion when I started to have individuals come in to our treatment center who had been involved in this and victim to this legal issue. And as far as my professional background, I have worked for 25 years in outpatient practice and intensive outpatient practice, working with individuals with problematic sexual behavior. And when I say PSB, I'll use that for an abbreviation. You know that stands for problematic sexual behavior. I also, however, have a residential center where we treat people from around the world for 30 days or more who are struggling with more intense PSB issues. And we started to see a number of individuals a handful of years ago who were caught victim to this issue. And so there are a number of types of sextortion, and we'll talk about that tonight. But that's how I got into this line of work here in terms of this issue. Let's see. I just had a computer glitch. Let's see here. Okay. So, by definition, sextortion involves threats to expose a sexual image in order to make a person do something or for some other reason, such as revenge or humiliation. And oftentimes, the driving force behind it is to gain some monetary increase. Now, as I said, a few years ago, certainly people had cell phones, children have cell phones, and this is when it really started to, this issue really started to come into the present culture, is when the sextortionists had an audience on everybody and everybody throughout the world who had a cell phone. And as we know that the age of individuals acquiring cell phones or some type of devices is decreasing significantly. And I'm sure most of you know, if you were to look at even an 18-month-old baby. They may not have a cell phone of their own, but they know very much how to work one. And so this really opened up this avenue for sextortionists to work their craft. So basically, to review, sextortion is any means of threat to expose an individual by virtue of sexual information or images to either make them humiliated, get revenge, lure them into some other type of relationship, harass, embarrass, or control, and including economic gain by the sextortionist. So specific types of sextortion. First of all, there's revenge porn. And I'm going to go into this more in depth later, so I'm just going to briefly introduce it here. Revenge porn, most of you have heard of that. Corruption. This is people who are in a position of power, and they use this type of technique to gain favors or gain things they want. Blackmail, which is a form of sextortion to acquire information or monetary gain. And the blackmail is a little less organized than cyber criminals. Blackmail may just be one individual working out of his or her basement. Cyber criminals, this is more organized crime, where you have individuals maybe in this country or another country who work as a network and a group to facilitate sextortion. There are child predators who are involved in chat rooms and online cyber communities that facilitate getting nude or sexual images or videos from children for the purpose of using them specifically, but often for selling these to other markets for actual child sexual abuse images and online sexual acts. So the victims of sextortion can be virtually anybody: men, women, children, many professionals, sex addicts, and trauma survivors. And just anyone who can get caught in this, who's on the internet. So talk about first sextortion and blackmail. This typically starts by a criminal getting online, maybe in a chat room, possibly on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, anything like that, and starting chatting or flirting with someone online. So they'll just throw a fishing line out there, something like, "You up? What you doing?" These can also be on platforms like Kick. Any dating sites also can have these individuals on them. And once the chatting and flirting starts, the criminal, the sextortionist, often will send a nude picture or some type of sexual tagline that they believe will ignite some sexual feeling and energy in the person on the other end of the screen. And so they send this information, and there's some dialogue back and forth, and they ask for a sexual image back. And once they get that, if they get that, they will generally then go offline for a few days or a few minutes. So this is commonly a process that takes several hours and even days to facilitate, but sometimes it's really a matter of a few minutes. And it depends upon the vulnerability of the victim on the other side of the internet, of the computer. So in a period of time, the person comes back online after they've received the image from the individual, from the victim. And one of their tactics often is they report that she or he, but it's often a she, although it may be he behind it, reports that they're under the age of 18 and says, if you don't send me money or more images, etc., we'll report this to the parents and the legal authorities, and you'll go to jail. So of course, this really frightens the child, and sometimes they steal a parent's credit card, or they have some money themselves, so they'll go about being able to go to the bank and somehow, whether it be through a wire transfer, or I've even seen cases where they actually get the cash and try and send it through the mail to stop this process from happening. So that's one scenario. Another scenario is an adult sends a sexual message to someone online, a random targeted person, so that we'll have trolls who are trolling different platforms, different online communities, and they'll see who are likely vulnerable and who keep coming on by their avatar or name, and they'll start chatting with them, and they'll send a picture. The person who receives the picture thinks that it's a picture of them, or it can often be a video, even with verbalized language. But in most cases, it's something that has been pre-recorded, maybe taken from another site, and they think that the victim thinks that they're actually talking with this person, when in reality it's just a pre-recorded person or video or picture. And so they'll lure the victim to send a video or a picture back, often of them masturbating. In these situations, they often act more acutely. They generally won't go offline for a long period of time. As soon as they get the picture or the video, they'll come back on the chat and say, hey, I've got your videos here, and I've got all of your friends, all of your followers, all the people you're following on Instagram, Facebook, etc. I've hacked your accounts. If you don't send me $10,000 within 5 hours, then this is going to go out to these individuals. And so oftentimes, and the victim will send the money, sometimes they won't. And the thing to do here always is not to send the money. And it puts someone who's involved in some sexual compulsive behaviors in a double bind of, gee, is my partner going to find out, or am I going to send this $10,000? But what generally happens is, if they don't send the money, then within just a few minutes, these pictures are sent to the friends and online acquaintances of them and their spouse, and then a spouse or a child gets these images, and they get a phone call or a message from a friend saying, hey, what's this deal? I just got nude pictures of your dad or your husband. And that's how often individual sexual compulsivity is exposed in some of these situations. So that's a very common and frequent form of sextortion that's utilized. Very, very traumatic to the victim and the secondary victims involved, if you can imagine. It's very serious. I've seen clinically children who have the pictures of a parent sent to them who were involved in the victim end of the sextortion process, and it's very, very, very traumatic. Now, another type of sextortion is revenge porn. Most of you have heard about this, but what this consists of is someone being in a relationship, and sometime during that relationship having received consensual images, sexual images from a partner, which they have stored on a phone, computer, other type of electronic device. And down the road, the relationship goes south, it goes bad. And so these images are then used to gain something back from the other individual or the victim. So sometimes it's used for getting money. Sometimes it may be used for getting things such as more parenting time with a child. It can be used for getting different situations in terms of better divorce decrees. Can also be, however, just used for the mere purpose of revenge and just pure humiliation and embarrassing the other person. And another thing that's used, it can be used for, is if a partner has had an affair and the victim in that situation has been shamed and humiliated, this is a way that they may try and get back to the person who's had the affair by exposing him or herself. Now, there are a number of revenge porn sites online. These are only some of them, a small list. But myex.com, aptitude.com, texan.com, GF or girlfriendrevenge.com, revengeporn.net, and girlfriendpics.com. Now, there have been cases where some of the major online hubs for pornography have also received images of revenge porn. They have a policy against it. However, there's not always a very strong vetting process of whether it's revenge porn or not. So it is possible that revenge porn images and videos can appear on those platforms, on those hubs, and are seen then by millions and millions of viewers. So a recent case in March of 2018 of March in Australia, where a case of sextortion occurred. Research from Australia suggests that as many as 1 in 5 individuals may be a victim of revenge porn. That's quite a significant amount. And some forums provide alphabetized directories of individuals by towns or cities in regards to whom are on revenge porn sites or sextortion type sites that you can go and look these particular people up. And the Australian government has been investigating one of these particular sites known as the Aussie Sluts site. And this is where people can go and request a photo, a sexual photo or a video of a specific individual, and then the owners of the site will try and go out and find this information. And it can be anything from them engaging in voyeurism at a swimming pool or even at their home. They'll look at their social media, do some hacks, that type of thing. And in this industry, on this particular site and in this particular type of sextortion, when you get one of these type of photos or videos, that's referred to as a win in this particular part of the sextortion group. And it's lingo for getting a nude picture of a specific person, whether that be a celebrity or a non-celebrity person. So a couple of common earlier cases of sextortion that we may have heard about part of the story, but not the whole story. One of the first cases of sextortion early on was Marilyn Monroe. And of course, you know that nude pictures of her were published in early pinup calendars in 1951 and 1952. Those pictures were taken years earlier by a photographer in 1941. And he purchased the photos from her for $50. And there were two requirements. One, that Marilyn had two requirements. One, that she got paid for them, and two, that the photographer's wife was present, both of which took place. Hugh Hefner allegedly found out about the videos or about the photos, paid $500 for them, and then ultimately published them in Playboy without her consent. And who knows how much money was made off that. So by definition, that's one of the first cases of sextortion that we believe was present. The other, Vanessa Williams, 1984 Miss America. Pictures surfaced that were surfacing just after she was crowned were taken in 1982 when she was working as a makeup artist for a photographer by the name of Tom Chappell. He eventually sold them to an individual and the publisher of Penthouse magazine for $14 million. And of course, there were lawsuits after that took place. So these are some very early things that were taking place in sextortion before we got into the digital issues here. So sextortion and child predators, and this is where I think a lot of community members may be very concerned. How do we protect our children from getting involved in this? And we'll talk about that. So quote here, he messaged me, flirting with me. It started out innocent enough, but then he started to want more and more, became more sexual. They ended up asking for pictures. I didn't feel good about it. He threatened to create a Facebook page with my nudes, chatting, flirting, preying on insecurities. I was caught. So oftentimes, children and adolescents will see a picture online or see a chat that is not necessarily starting with a sexual theme, but maybe there'll be something about teddy bears or kittens or puppies or something that the online predator will know will be an interest to the child. And they will know that by looking at their profiles and seeing what type of individuals they're following and who are following them. They'll start with that, start to build a relationship, and then it will gradually turn sexual. With the online predators, and there are fewer specific professional criminals than there are more part-time criminals, if you will. And the online predators, very, very crafty in terms of what they do, and they go after larger amounts of money. They're a little bit more sophisticated. In 2009, an individual named Luis Miangos got very good at hacking computers. And he tricked teenage victims into downloading malware on their computer, used webcams to take pictures of them, and then sent the messages that included photos. He sent these messages back to the individuals that included photos. And he threatened them to post them on Facebook accounts and other media. There wasn't a lot in 2009, but Facebook was a large one if they did not send him more images. This is, if you go to YouTube, you can click on, there's numerous stories, news stories about sextortion. And these are some of the highlights that I chose right from YouTube about news stories or cases that involved sextortion issues. And there are not laws in every part of the country or world, backing up, there's not laws in every part of the world, every country of the world governing sextortion. And in the last few years, however, most states in the United States of America have been passing laws that can protect victims of sextortion. And so you're pretty well protected legally in the states, but not necessarily out of the states. And one of the problems is in some of the more fine-tuned sextortion rings, the perpetrators and predators are out of the country who are fishing for victims inside the country. And so even though it's illegal, prosecution and restoration is very, very, very difficult. So just a bit of a graphic there, that when someone gets hooked into sextortion, they're going to see an image that may look something similar on the left, very alluring, very attractive, but in reality, you're going to get something more on the right side there. So another case, cyber criminals. 2013, John, a 26-year-old customer service supervisor, received a message while he was at work one day on Facebook from someone named Samantha Chang from Hong Kong. The message said, "I have something to show you." And had some type of a sexual lure, so he went into the bathroom and started video chatting with the woman who took off her clothes. She then asked him to return the favor and asked him to perform oral sex on himself, which he subsequently did. He then logged off and went back to work. 2 hours later, he got a message from her stating that she had posted the video of him performing oral sex on self and on YouTube, and demanded $3,000. And stated, "If you don't give me this, then I'll send this to all of your friends on Facebook and other contacts." And said that he was already in process of that. He verified that the video was indeed already on YouTube. So he sent the money and kept getting more demands for more money. And after several requests, he had sent a total of $9,000. Eventually, he called the Hong Kong authorities and let them take care of that. Now, it wasn't completely taken care of. Of course, anything overseas is very, very hard because you then involve multiple legal agencies, CIA, FBI from the States, and the equivalent overseas. And so it's going to be very hard to get any type of reparation when these individuals when victims are interacting with people who are overseas. So sextortion and sexual compulsivity, or problematic sexual behavior. This often happens when the individual gets involved in sending or receiving nude pictures online. Now, there are many forums, many chat rooms, some in the dark web, but not even in the dark web, where people just go in and they want to talk about, they can talk about child pornography, they can talk about teenagers, they can talk about different fetishes. And so the sextortion trolls will go in there and look at the patterns of these individuals, and they'll find out who they believe could be potential prey of their sextortion acts. The perpetrator threatens to post pictures on the Facebook or other social media, again, if the money is not sent. And in these forums, in these sexual chat rooms, it's very, very loose community. And so people are sending pictures of themselves. They're sending pictures that they've taken from other sites, they've received from other individuals. And this is a very, very fertile ground for individuals who fall prey to sextortion. And just a common page here, common victim who they would troll. They would see who are people who they think would be more vulnerable and go to their sites. We're going to try this one more time, crossing your finger. Maybe this doesn't look like it's going to work for some reason. I'm sorry. So back to sextortion, then on corruption. This is where there's more power involved in terms of the sextortion. So in 2007, a U.S. immigration officer promised a green card to an immigrant in exchange for oral sex. The sexual demands were caught on tape, and the individual eventually was sentenced to 1.5 to 4.5 years in prison. So in terms of the overall process, this is a flowchart that gives a little bit of an explanation in terms of how it could happen. One case scenario, the victim and the offender may know each other. They may begin sexting, and maybe it then leads to cyber revenge and goes to then revenge porn, which is then posted on specific revenge porn sites, which we talked about. Now, the revenge porn is a relatively new issue in the last 10 years. And in most states of the union, there are revenge porn laws. I think there are still a few where it's not present. And in the beginning, there were not really any laws because it was such a new issue. But in most states of the union, there are revenge porn laws where perpetrators can be prosecuted. In cases where the victim and the offender are strangers, often will begin in video chat, which can lead them to the webcam blackmail, where they will again come on and request money, or sextortion for other type of situations, whether it be favors, power, position, or simply more photos that they would then sell to other platforms where pornography is sold. And amongst all this, there's a whole lot of webcam trolling, and people will just troll certain sites over and over and over again to see the patterns, almost like a computer algorithm. And they're looking at this in terms of just their own brain and eyesight, but they can use algorithms to detect the patterns of individuals and what type of sexual contact or content they're sharing. So very much like if you go on your Google and you search for buying a bow and arrow or something on your news feeds and Facebook or your news sites, if you don't have those features turned off, you're going to start seeing all types of advertisements for bows and arrows. And same technology is used by these perpetrators. And the overall goal is to extort money or sexual material. So I'm going to ask here if you would be comfortable. This presentation and exercise is generally given in an in-person live format. That, of course, isn't the case in this situation. But I'm going to explain the exercise, and then if some of you are willing and would like to participate, we can do so. You can do so at your free will, and we can work through this here today. But I do understand it's a little bit different in this type of an electronic setting. So this is if we were together, I would explain this exercise as it certainly requiring vulnerability, recognizing that confidentiality is a must, and is important for everyone to feel safe. Now, if some of you did want to participate in this, and it's again completely up to you, this portion would not be on the YouTube channel. So what I invite people to do, if we were in person together, is to write on a piece of paper something that you would extremely fear of someone else learning about or finding out about. Whether it was an affair or whether it was something that you did in high school, etc. I would ask people to write it on a slip of paper and to not put a name on it so that it cannot be identified. Then place it in a box. We'd place it in a box. And then as those items of paper were placed in the box, I would then gather them together and one by one read the issues that were placed in the box and written by the individuals. Now, normally I have had about 100 or so participants in this and generally get about 75 to 80 pieces of paper. And so I go up to the top and read the individual's statements. That takes about sometimes 20, 25 minutes. And what I ask the individuals to do is to simply be aware of what they feel in their body, in their mind, in their brain as their item was read. Now, of course, as they were read, no one around them knew that it was them. No one knew that it was a particular person that wrote it on the piece of paper. But the feedback that we typically get is they felt a rush of blood to their head, got very hot, very cold, a lot of anxiety, and they experienced it as if other people did know that it was them. So if any of you wanted to participate in something like that at the end of the presentation, we can do something like that only if you desire. And what you would do is go into the chat option and submit a statement with the confidentiality or anonymous option in play so that no one would know who it was. And if there are some of those at the end, we can do some of that experiential exercise. However, again, completely up to you and no pressure at all with that. But I think whether or not if you're in a live situation or not, just empathize with somebody. You know, we do get very, very embarrassed when sensitive issues about ourselves are exposed. So that can help to give some insight into how a victim of sextortion may be experiencing what he or she is experiencing. Now, it's challenging in cases where the individual is involved in some type of problematic sexual behavior online. There's often two losses there for the partner. One, the partner may for the first time be discovering that her partner has a problem with sexual behavior, but two, it's exposed to all of his and or her friends and contacts, and so is doubly traumatic. And in cases where that goes to the legal realm, where maybe the individual would call the authorities, the legal authorities are referring to the husband, in this case, as a victim. And that's even more traumatic on the spouse, because she's saying, what do you mean victim? My life's one that just got destroyed. He did this to me, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see the depth of the psychological trauma and impact to all of those who are involved. Now, statistics show that about 78% of the incidents of sextortion involve female children. And that's devastating. Many of those would then go on, the photos or the pictures, videos would go on to be on child pornography platforms. 71% involve only minor age victims. Computer hacking cases take place in about 43% of the cases. Backing up, I'm sorry. Computer hacking cases, 43% were adults. So in all the hacking, computer hacking, 43% of those cases were adults. 12% involve male victims. 10%, they were unable to determine the gender. And the research shows with this, these surveys here, that the average age of the first time victimization is 15 years of age. So again, to repeat and to recap, the three main objects of all sextortion is to acquire additional sexually explicit photos and videos. That's in about 75% of the cases. 6% to obtain money. However, the money are the cases that you'll commonly hear the most about online. And in 6%, those cases were complete child trafficking cases where the objective was to have sex with the child. Another organization looked at 90% of revenge porn victims were in this sample, were females. So 90% of the victims in this revenge porn sample were females. 93% of those individuals said that they have suffered significant emotional distress due to being a victim. And 49% said they have been harassed or stalked online by users who saw their material. Now, I want to talk here for a minute about some other forums that are popping up that make this issue of sextortion even more problematic, and it's expanded the technology by which predators of this type of crime can benefit. So you may have heard of deep fake porn. And deep fake porn refers to the technology of basically taking a headshot of somebody and being able to put it on the body of another individual in a video type setting, where it's not just photoshopping, but on the body of a already established porn performer, and then they're utilized in different videos. And so this can be a scenario, this is the last couple of years really, where a victim doesn't even have to be involved in any type of online chatting, sexual chatting, any of those traditional ways. A troll will just go to the website, your social media site, whether it be Facebook or Instagram, TikTok or whatnot, and they'll use the artificial intelligent technology, take your headshot, maybe take a few of them, the computer combines them together, they're on the placed on the body with physical movements of someone who has performed in porn before, or another victim who they've taken the videos of someone else. They then send those to the victims and say, hey, we have these of you, and if you don't send us money, we're going to get sex short money from you. Those are very traumatic because, one, the individual had nothing to do with that. Traumatic to parents, to partners, because they're seeing this for the first time. Now, that's something that's very, very common and becoming more and more frequent. It's a little frightening on a smaller scale. And when I say smaller scale, not so much an organized crime scale and level, but on a smaller scale, because this is technology that most adolescents can acquire. And so they'll often do the deep fake technology shots with people not in nude situations or pornographic situations, but just take the head of someone and put them on the body of a friend or whatnot. And they have that technology, and some youth are very, very good at it. So the vulnerability here is having an underdeveloped brain, prefrontal cortex, where an adolescent, teenager, they're not quite where they need to be impulse-wise, impulse control-wise, and they'll do something like that in the realm of sexuality just to have fun, think it's a joke or whatnot, but it turns out obviously being very, very serious. So in terms of educating families and children and community members, I think this issue of deep fake porn needs to really, really be communicated well, and parents ought to really go deep in identifying what the artificial technology is that is available and can be used there, and set some very firm boundaries with their children and their youth. On top of that, it's certainly appropriate for parents to talk about how just normal sexual feelings can get you involved in, can get a child or a youth involved in a sextortion scam. Depression rates are going up, anxiety rates are going up, social isolation is increasing because of the pandemic, although it was increasing prior to the pandemic, but even so, more so now. Most of our children are now spending several hours a day in front of a screen on a computer that has access to the internet on all of their social media. And so, although they may be doing school for some of that time, and hopefully are, they're looking at Instagram and TikTok and all of those sorts of things. The sextortion trolls know this, and they're watching the algorithms, they're watching the patterns. And so we need to communicate to children and to adolescents that we need to have a deeper level of transparency, that the days, if there ever were days where a young person could just have unfettered access to his or her social media accounts, those days are probably over. We need to have parents who are going to be very involved, caregivers who are very involved with some type of monitoring and feedback and accountability for the adult to know what's really going on in the adolescent's life or the child's life online. And one of the serious things that's happening today is there's a little bit of a drift range going from professional oriented porn to amateur porn. And if you're not aware of what amateur porn is basically when a non-professional model begins posting pictures of him or herself on websites to be viewed. Now, there's a way that organizations and platforms are helping to facilitate that. And some of these platforms are called My Fans or Fans Only, OnlyFans. These are sites, these are professional sites that post amateur pictures. And what they do is they allow any individual to take nude videos or videos of themselves, post them in a gallery setting on these particular sites. The poster, the individual who is posting the pictures of him or herself, then can set a fee for a monthly subscription. They tell that fee, what they want that fee to be, to the organizer of the site. They give them his or her bank account numbers and routing numbers. The organizer of the site then say, we're taking X% of all of the monthly subscriptions that you get. In many of these platforms, the only requirement of getting your pictures on these platforms is basically clicking a box saying, yes, I'm over the age of 18. So patrons then can come and browse through advertisements of the different galleries and then pay a subscription, and this money goes right into the account of these individuals. Well, sextortionists are certainly watching this and getting involved in this. And a lot of the advertising of the people who post their own material, it starts on places like TikTok or Instagram, Facebook, where they'll show a sexual image teaser that says, hey, this is me, follow my link to over here, and they'll follow it and then be asked to pay a fee. Now, some of those are legit in that they're directly from the person who has posted the pictures. Healthy or not is irrelevant at this point, but it's not in the sextortion realm yet. But there are other individuals who are more of the organized crime individuals who will take some of those pictures off multiple sites and post them on Instagram or TikTok, Facebook, and say, hey, follow me to these sites where you'll see pornography. And they're stating that it's free, and they go to these sites and then they ask them to insert a credit card number, or they'll say, this is a dating site and I want you to sign up for this dating site. And most don't, but numerous ones do. And they're then selling borrowed or stolen content from different sites, and basically sextorting money from some of these other individuals in an indirect way. So I think as far as the public service announcement of this presentation tonight, these are topics that we've got to be talking about with children. If we're a parent here tonight, we've got to talk about them with our children, our young children, our adolescents, even our adult children who may be going out to college, because there are peddlers, if you will, who are recruiting young men and young women to participate in the OnlyFans type of sites. And that in essence becomes their part-time job while they're at college. And some individuals purporting to make thousands of dollars a month while they're going to college. And if the young people aren't aware of these issues, they could fall prey to sextortion or any other number of online predatory practices. The other part of the public service announcement here is that we've got to communicate to our children and help them recognize how the brain can get snagged in this very easily. And it's almost like a hypnotic trance, because our brains are hardwired to respond to sexual stimuli. Very normal, very healthy, very appropriate in many scenarios. And SASH is all about sexual health and establishing a sense of healthy sexuality across the lifespan. But if our communication with children and young people has not been clear about sexuality, then they may get snagged by one of these sexual images, and the limbic system, which is the right side of the brain, gets really highly activated, and the prefrontal cortex starts to go offline a little bit. And during those times, our decisions then are made with our emotional brain. And that's when we tend to get in trouble. And in most of these cases we've talked about tonight, all of us could say, you know, that's kind of a no-brainer. I would recognize that. I would know not to do that. But the reality is, people that I have seen who have been victims of sextortion are the people who are defending people in court. They're the people who are performing highly sensitive medical operations. They're the people who are teaching children in school. And so these are intelligent people. These are people who are preaching sermons in religious congregations across the country. And so it really has very little to do with intelligence and has everything to do with vulnerability at the time. And so we know that the more vulnerable to depression and anxiety and shame one is, the more likely they may be to get involved with sextortion, because they may be more socially isolated and they're not thinking in full capacity with prefrontal cortex. The other part of the public service announcement here for clinicians that are here is, we've got to be aware of this information and this data so that we can adequately educate the people who are coming in to our clinics and our offices, whether it be parents who are seeking help for children, or whether it be people who are coming in for betrayal trauma or for strictly the PSB side. We've got to be able to untangle and unravel for them how this incident really took place. And for the partners on the betrayal trauma, they are completely convinced that it was intentional, that they knew exactly what they were doing. And in some cases, that may be more true than others. But I can't think of a single case where an individual wants to get online and participate in something, and at the end of it pay a $10,000 user fee. I've never seen that happen. So it takes some time and some couples work to unravel this for both individuals. So what is it that keeps then victims from coming forward? One, there's a fear of being judged. And we can imagine all those reasons why they would be fearful of this. Fear of further exploitation. And once professional sextortionists know that someone is vulnerable, they're going to go after them again. And especially if that perpetrator has not come to the attention of the authorities. And a lot of people, again, just send money. I have seen cases personally where the amount of money that has been sent has been close to $100,000 US. and the individuals in those cases were still afraid to come forward because of judgment. There's fear of anger of a spouse, fear of rejection from parents, partners, etc. And simply the good old fight, flight, or freeze response. So in our brain, just as a bit of a review, we have the limbic system that is set up to handle emotions. And deep in the brain is the amygdala that is designed to detect danger. So we can walk into a room and see a face that makes us anxious. We go outside and see a big dog coming at us. That engages the fight or the flight response. And the fight or flight response occurs when adrenaline is released into the bloodstream as a result of what we call the HPA axis activating the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and adrenal gland. All those, that triangle of the brain being activated to get adrenaline, or basically speed, into the bloodstream so that we can fight the situation, fight the dog, or flee, run away. When the prefrontal cortex recognizes and the body recognizes that fighting isn't possible, we're not going to win, and fleeing isn't possible, we're not going to be fast enough, then a third option comes into play, and that's the freeze, where we just simply freeze. And in most cases where sexual assault and sexual trauma is present, freeze is the response. Now, this type of sexual assault is a little bit different than traditional sexual assault, where someone may be having a hands-on assault, whether it be rape or molest, some type of touching. This is a bit different because even more so than the traditional sexual abuse, the victim doesn't realize that he or she is really being victimized. They're feeling guilty that, oh, they're doing something wrong. They were sending pictures, or they were asking for pictures. And the grooming tactics, however, are virtually the same, very, very similar from these online offenses, between these online offenses and the in-person hands-on offenses. The perpetrator builds trust, takes an interest in the individual, helps them to feel calm. And so when they engage in the abuse, it causes question in the mind, is this really abuse or is it not? And so both hands-on and online victims are going to feel that a large sense of confusion, but it's a little more intense, in my opinion. Not intense, it's a little more gray in the online situations because of the things that the victim may have done to be a more active participant. And I'm thinking specifically, if an individual gets on for their own sexual reasons, as an adult, I want to be involved in some sexual experiences here, sends a picture and then gets sextorted, they had a little more involvement with that up front and don't realize the degree of manipulation. So they're not coming forward typically for these reasons. And the fight, flight, and freeze is very, very real. And so as we're working with family members or loved ones, clients in a clinical setting, we need to be able to explain that to them very clearly. In the case of an addict and victim of cybercrime, partners are often victimized, as we've said earlier, due to the acute and unexpected exposure of the addiction. And these people who are addicts or involved in PSV, they don't want to bring any more harm or shame or embarrassment or trauma to their loved ones. And so they'll often just bite the bullet and not seek legal intervention. This shame may also prevent individuals from getting treatment. And so as community people, as clinicians, we need to talk about this, blog about it, write about it, let people know that it's becoming a more and more common thing in our society so that people will get help. We know this is very similar to the cycles we've been through before, where in the 1900s, when substance abuse was becoming more common and open in our community, clinicians and healthcare professionals were recognizing that people were suffering from this, and we moved from a state of it being a shameful, moral, characterological defect to it being a disease in the disease model. We're now seeing that with problematic sexual behavior, and now as we see some of the subsets of PSB, this is part of that we need to be talking about more and more. Similar to sexual abuse. For many, many years, beginning back with Freud, victims would not come forward with sexual abuse at all. And then as the research has progressed, more cases have come forward, there are still people who are very much afraid, and rightly so, to come forward, but more people are. And so talking about it is crucial. And as we treat, as a professional treats individuals with addiction or PSB issues, we've got to simultaneously be willing and able to treat the victimization issues. And if we miss one or the other, we've missed giving the comprehensive full treatment. And if so, then the aftermath may go on indefinitely. So, treatment considerations. And this is for clinicians, but also for individuals who would be bringing loved ones into a clinic to get help. These individuals have got to feel safe in this treatment environment. So we've got to make sure that the therapist that we're bringing a person to has some knowledge of this, that they know what they're talking about, and they can provide a safe environment and that we feel safe with them. Recognizing that it's likely to be long-term. This is typically not short-term therapy. Optimally, will include a combination of individual therapy and group therapy. And the group therapy could be a combination of PSB groups, or it could be a combination of some victimization groups as well. May need extended individual therapy prior to group therapy, however, in terms of preparing the individuals to be able to talk about this. EMDR therapy and trauma work could be very, very effective in terms of the trauma that's associated with this in both the primary victim and the secondary victim, the partner, the children, and even contacts of the partner and the primary victim who saw these videos and pictures as a result of sextortion. A lot of empowerment work. And sometimes this consists of the individuals learning more about the sextortion issue and then becoming a voice for themselves and for others who may have been unheard in this area in the past and about the victimization. Bessel van der Kolk talks about how yoga and neurofeedback can be very effective therapeutic treatments for victims of sexual trauma. Needs to be a lot of work on shame reduction, and then a great deal of work on forgiveness of self. And one of the things that I like to finish up this work with when I'm working with individuals who have been a victim of this is for them to write a letter of forgiveness to themselves, where they basically acknowledge and give themselves permission to be human, to recognize that they got lured into this, regardless of what they brought to the table. They got lured into this by someone's craftiness and seductive work, and that they need to forgive themselves in order to go forward and heal from this completely. So in terms of bringing this to a close tonight, if I could just give a few little nuggets that I would hope that we would all be able to take out of this presentation. First of all, I would hope that we would be willing to educate ourselves more on this issue and get involved, do internet searches through Google, Bing, other search engines, YouTube, and you're going to find a lot of information. Now, there may be some fear about seeing sexualized images in that process. I certainly can't promise that you won't, but for the most part, the research that I've done, it's pretty adult friendly. And I think that you as parents and or clinicians could go and gain the material that you wanted to gain and then share it with family members or people in your clinic. And there, again, there's numerous videos out there, normally about 3 to 4 or 5 minutes, that were taken off primetime television where sextortion issues were being exposed. And so it's appropriate for television. So I hope we could begin to have the dialogue and the conversation. One of SASH's taglines is join the conversation. And we're really about communicating. That's why we have these webinars, that's why we have our conferences. We want to increase the conversation, decrease the stigma, and be able to talk about these things, because shame cannot coexist with light. So when we talk about things, we bring things out into the light, and shame cannot continue to exist long-term when we're talking about things in a very healthy and appropriate way. So that's the first nugget. Learn about it and talk about it. Secondly, I would hope that as parents and clinicians, we could take upon ourselves somewhat of a role and almost a mission of recognizing that we have a responsibility to protect and to keep our eyes open. And if we see our young people's social media, that they're engaging in cyberbullying, whether it be sexual bullying, emotional bullying, anything of that nature, we need to say something. We need to communicate it to the people in our family. We may need to go to the schools and talk about things and let people know that we can't just stand by in today's world any longer and just allow things to happen. I remember when my 2 oldest daughters first got cell phones, and this was about 2005 or 6, somewhere in that range. I noticed that something changed drastically in our home. And these were just the old flip phones, no internet, basically calling and text. We still had a landline at that time. I noticed one thing that happened, and that was the phone stopped ringing, and I stopped knowing who my children were talking to. Their phone conversations didn't necessarily decrease, but I stopped being in the loop. That's the first thing that happened. Second thing is there started to be an increased number, well, not an increase, they just started texting. And 4,500 texts per month was not unusual at that time for teenagers. And so there were all these submersive messages that were taking place that I had no idea about. Whereas before they were on the phone, either connected by a cord or in the family room somewhere, and I had an idea of what was going on. So the amount of information that as a parent I had greatly decreased. And so with now social media, that's even more submersive. And kids today, they have their normal account, but then they have their spam account. And the spam account is their spam Instagram or TikTok account, where they don't really want you looking very deeply. So they're going to put some of their more coercive or the more coarse things on there, a little more off-colored. And as parents, we've got to be involved. And my recommendation to a parent where a adolescent under the age of 18 has a social media account, I think they're great. It's part of our world. But I think two things ought to happen. One, I, as a parent, I'm going to follow your account on Instagram. So I'm going to be one of your followers. You follow me, so I can see what's going on. But secondly, as a backup measure, I'm going to log into your account from my phone, and it's going to stay logged in. So I have an idea of what's going on. You're welcome to post whatever you want to post, but know that I'm going to look at it. A third thing that I think can be used as a protective nature there is there are software packages that will allow a parent or an administrator to manage the account on social media. So basically saying that the person can have social media for these hours, it goes on at this hour, it goes off at that hour. If the parent or guardian wanted to turn off for some reason or another in real time, they can just push the button and it can be turned off. So that keeps us involved in the individual's lives so that we can help protect them. And the parent or the parent will always run the risk of being told by the adolescent, you're the meanest parent out there, that you're the most controlling parent out there. And I'm just here to say, don't believe the lie. It's not true. You're not the meanest parent out there. You're not the most controlling parent out there, but you may be one of the most involved parents out there. And if that's the case, congratulations to you. You're taking a proactive role at trying to help protect your child and help them develop while their brain is developing into adulthood and getting to the point where they can then make more rational and informed decisions themselves.